Welcome to Cyber Bytes, your weekly dose in the latest in cybersecurity news. I'm your host, Edwin Kwan, and today we've got a critical Linux bug that can hand over root access, active exploitation of a cPanel off bypass affecting over 1 million systems, a CVSS 10 flaw in Google's Gemini CLI, and a big shift in phishing, where AI is now behind most attacks. Plus, something new and slightly unsettling, malware campaigns specifically targeting AI agents. So let's get right into it. First up, Linux, and this one is important. A newly disclosed vulnerability being called copyfail is tied to the Linux kernel copy file range system call. Now, on paper, that function is pretty boring. It just copies data between files efficiently. But the issue is how it handles permissions and memory. Researchers found that a local attacker, meaning someone who already has some level of access, can exploit this to escalate privileges all the way to root. And once you're root, that's game over. You've got full system control. What makes this particularly risky is where Linux is used. Think of shared hosting, cloud environments, enterprise servers, places where multiple users and services coexist. So if one account gets compromised, this bug could let an attacker jump straight to full control of the system. There's no confirmed widespread exploitation yet, but the patches are rolling out across major distributions right now. So if you're running Linux in production, update as soon as the patch lands, limit unnecessary local user access, and keep an eye out on privilege escalation activity in your logs. And this is one of those low noise, high impact vulnerabilities. Up next, and this one is already being exploited, cPanel and WHM have patched a critical authentication bypass vulnerability. It's tracked as CVE 2026-41940, and it's sitting at a CVSS score of 9.8. So just a little shy of the maximum. Here's the problem though. Attackers don't need credentials at all. They can manipulate how session data is written by causing a carriage return injection flaw, essentially injecting special characters into HTTP headers. That tricks the system into writing a session file that says something like user equals root, no login required, and just like that, they get administrative access. Now, this gets serious fast when you consider the scale. There are around 1.5 million cPanel instances exposed to the internet. And even worse, there are signs this has been exploited as a 0-day since February, and that's well before the patch has dropped. A proof of concept is already public, which means copycat attacks are basically inevitable. If you're running cPanel or WHM, patch immediately. Not later today, do it now. Temporary workarounds like blocking port 2083 and 2087 can help, but they're not a fix. And check for any suspicious admin activity or unknown session files. This is the kind of bug attackers love. They're simple, reliable, and it's a very high reward. Now, let's talk about AI bots, because they're quickly becoming a new attack surface. Google just patched a maximum severity, a CVSS 10 vulnerability in its Gemini CLI. And this one's pretty interesting. The issue comes from how the CLI handled trusted workspaces. In headless environments like your CI/CD pipelines, it would automatically trust whatever folder it was running in. So if an attacker could sneak malicious configuration into that environment, Gemini would load it and execute those commands on the host system. And this is before any sandboxing kicked in. That's a big deal because it turns things like GitHub Actions pipeline into potential entry points. Google's fix now require explicit trust settings before loading configs, which is how it should have worked from the start. There was also another issue in something called YOLO mode, which, as the name suggests, automatically approve actions. Unfortunately, that included shell commands even when they shouldn't have been allowed. So prompt injection could trick the system into running arbitrary commands. And it doesn't stop there. 2 more vulnerabilities were disclosed in the AI Dev 2 cursor. One allowed code execution just by asking the AI to explain a repository, and if that repo contains malicious Git hooks. And the second, called cursor jacking. It lets extensions access sensitive data like API keys that are stored locally. And that one's still unpatched. The bigger takeaway here is that AI tools are being deeply integrated into development workflows, but the security models haven't fully caught up. If you are using these tools, treat the inputs as untrusted by default. Lock down what your AI tools can execute and be very cautious with automation features that skip human review. Convenience is great until it isn't. And now onto phishing. And this is where things are moving really quickly. According to new research from KnowBe4, 86% of phishing attacks are now AI generated. And that's a huge jump. And honestly, it tracks with what a lot of teams are seeing. Phishing emails used to be easier to spot. You've got your bad grammar, your weird phrasing, some obvious red flags. Now, they're clean, personalized, and context aware. Attackers can generate messages that sound like your manager, reference real projects, and adapt tone depending on the target. And they can do it at scale. What used to take time and effort can now be automated in seconds. This changes the game for defenders because traditional awareness training, which have you look for spelling mistakes, just don't cut it anymore. Organizations need to shift towards behavior-based detection, things like unusual requests or timing, continuous training instead of one-off sessions, and reinforcing verification habits, like confirming sensitive requests through another channel. At this point, it's less about spotting bad emails and more about spotting risky situations. And finally, something a bit newer and honestly a sign of where things are heading. Researchers have uncovered 2 malware frameworks called ClawHub and Claude Swarm. And these aren't targeting your traditional endpoints. They are targeting AI agents. So instead of infecting laptops or servers directly, attackers are going after those autonomous AI systems, the one being used in workflows, automation, and decision making. ClawHub handles the initial compromise, getting into vulnerable AI deployments, and then ClawSwarm coordinates those compromised agents into a kind of distributed network, basically an AI-powered botnet. And what are they doing with it? Well, at the moment, it's just crypto mining. But the bigger concern is the model. AI agents often have high levels of access, broad permissions, and implicit trust within systems, which makes them very attractive targets. If compromised, they can operate quietly and at scale. The recommendation here is pretty clear. treat AI agents like privileged accounts, apply strict access controls, monitor their behavior closely, and don't assume they're safe just because they are internal. This is likely just the beginning of this category. And that's it for this week's Cyber Bites. If there's a theme across all of this, it's escalation. Whether it's privilege escalation in Linux, auth bypass in cPanel, or AI tools being pushed beyond their intended boundaries. And of course, attackers are moving fast on AI, both using it and targeting it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.